All right, welcome everyone. I'm so excited to have you here for this webinar about pen names. As you can see from the corner of my Zoom, my name is Jessica Smith. However, I publish under the pen name of Paula Jean Ferry. I've done that for the past 5 years. And I get asked a lot of questions about why you chose a pen name. It's because my name is Jessica Smith. I joked the entire time I was growing up about how that was my witness protection name. And when I decided to publish and become an author, I wanted my book to be visible. I wanted it to be searchable. It didn't hurt that, and I've been doing it a lot today, so you might hear this, but I have something called Tourette syndrome. I make random noises. I will scream on occasion. Know that I'm okay. Even if it's a gasping one, the gasping one scares people. But my first book was actually about the Tourette syndrome. A little bit more about me. My first book was called Awkwardly Strong. Like I said, I published it about 5 years ago in 2016. And it was the most addicting thing I've ever done. I've never understood adrenaline junkies until I hit that publish button on my first book. And now, despite being a writer my entire life, I've been journaling since I was probably 8 years old. But this was now just my life and I had to move forward with it. So I've since published 2 more called Tragically Strong and Fearfully Strong. I'm about to release my 4th book about self-publishing, and it's called Hard Earned Lessons Learned. It's all the things that I did wrong publishing my first book. And I learned a ton with that first book because I didn't have anyone to show me. I just kind of jumped on in and said, let's do this. I tend to have this bull in a china shop approach to most of life. And I've taken it to my writing career as well. So when I decided to publish a book, wanting it to be visible, and my first book being about my Tourette syndrome, another fun fact about my Tourette's, I've named them. They have their own personality. It's just kind of easy to say, oh yeah, my Tourette's did that, it wasn't me. So with the crazy personality that she had, she earned the name of Paula from a few friends of mine. And so I knew that I wanted Paula to be part of my pen name. But what comes after that? The point of having a pen name, like I said, is I wanted it to be something that was searchable, something that could be visible across the internet. When you typed in my name, I wanted to be what pops up. So I have, obviously, there were a few selections that I couldn't choose. I couldn't choose Paula Abdul. I couldn't choose several other names. This was actually quite the process for me. It was also kind of fun because it was just kind of something you had to play with and see. One of my coworkers at a previous job of mine insisted that her name was Paula Jenkins, and I had to publish under Paula Jenkins. And I took the idea, I looked it up. When I searched for Paula Jenkins, there's a fitness instructor. And I decided, nope, sorry, I want that. I want it to be all mine. Like I said, I wanted it to be visible. That's the main and biggest benefit of a pen name. I also loved the anonymity of Jessica Smith. I want to have my personal private life without it being on display for everyone. I am very open about a lot of things. Obviously, we talk about my Tourette syndrome a lot, but at the same time, there are certain aspects of my life that I don't mind keeping more private, and some things that I don't want searchable on the World Wide Web. So having that anonymity, yet being able to be visible, was a huge balance and benefit to choosing a pen name. So what I ended up doing, in talking with a few friends, they're like, oh, you don't want to do a pen name because don't you want to put your name on your work? Aren't you proud of the work that you've done? Absolutely. I'm very proud of the work that I've done. And I did want it to still be something that was personal and connected to me. Like I said, using my Tourette syndrome name, my Paula, was a good start, but it did get me thinking about being able to keep it connected to me and to my family. And I love history. I love genealogy. I love looking at my family and the path that we've taken over the course of several years. There you've met Paula. But looking at my family history, my sweet, sweet grandmother, she's one of my best friends. I love this grandma so much. She was adopted when she was young. Her birth father's name was John. Well, okay, it also depends on where you look at it. This is quite the story, and it's kind of fun. But he immigrated from Italy. And so his name in Italy was Giovanni Tagliaferri. And he had no other children aside from my grandma. And so I always felt bad for this poor man. He actually died when my grandma was only one, so no one really knows much about him. And I've always felt a strong connection to my Italian heritage. So what I did was I took his name in a way, because I didn't trust people to say the Tagliaferri. There's a G in there, guys. And while it would have definitely given me that limited visibility, I wanted it to be something that is easy for people to remember and going to stick. That's something else that you want to consider when picking a pen name. Yes, you want it to be unique, but if it's so unique that no one can say it, no one can spell it, it's still going to be hard to find you and still going to be hard to search. So when he came through Ellis Island, his name was changed to John Filio Ferry. So I took the Ferry, F-E-R-R-I, a little bit easier to remember, a little bit easier to say, to spell. And so I became Paula Ferry. It still didn't sound quite right. The Jean was another funny story. And just because I'm a storyteller, I'm going to tell you this story as well. When I told my friend from work that I decided against Paula Jenkins, she said that's not possible, that's her name. So she still insisted her name was Paula Jenkins. But we were having a potluck at work, and it was a soul food potluck. So everyone was just kind of supposed to bring some kind of soul food. But being in Utah, not everyone actually knew what that was. And so cute little Miss Adelina had to explain, you know, in her Southern accent, because that's where she was from, about how anything slathered in butter. She started talking about Paula Deen, but right at that point when she was talking about Paula Deen, my Paula went off and scared her. She jumped and started to scream at me, but she crossed her words. So my Paula's name in her mind was Paula Jenkins, and crossed it with Paula Deen, and it came out Paula Jean. And I'm like, actually, I kind of like that. I might take that. I'll give you that much, because I won't take the Jenkins. And when I searched Paula Jean, there were a couple of names that popped up, but nothing that anyone had published under, nothing that was any kind of arts and entertainment. There were still a few articles about people named Paula Jean, nothing that had the full combination of Paula Jean Ferry. So if you were to do a quick Google search, most of what you're going to see under Paula Jean Ferry is my articles, some press releases that I've done, stuff about my books, some podcasts that I've been on. If you go a little bit farther, I think I've got the entire top 10 of Google is my work. But if you were to keep going, you will find other stuff. I think there was some Wikipedia articles about a Paula Jean who disappeared once. Random little things that not many people are actively searching for. So that's kind of how I got my pen name and why I chose that. And so there were some very specific points in there. I think I saw you guys taking some notes with making sure that it's visible, making sure that it's unique, making sure that it's something that people will remember, also super important. And there's so many ways and variations that you can do this. If you look at other famous authors, even something as simple as J.K. Rowling, very famous name, but unless you actually do some digging, You have to dig to find her first name. And so she still has a little bit of privacy. Another reason that you would want to do a pen name, speaking of J.K. Rowling, who does on occasion use an alias, if you're crossing genres. So for me, I write nonfiction self-help books. If I wanted to do something completely off the wall, I would typically want to choose a different pen name, because my audience and the people that follow me know that I'm going to be talking about self-help and something that's going to make them better. And if I go and do something way out in left field from what I'm currently writing, say, and this is not my genre, I wouldn't do it, but just to show extremes, if I were to say write an erotica novel, people aren't going to want to read that if they're doing the self-help. So if that was something I wanted to do, I would probably want to pick a pen name. I am currently working on a work of fiction. It's a historical fiction, but I'm still going to use the name of Paula Jean Ferry because it does still tie in to this audience base that I've built. You want to always keep your audience base in mind. So because my nonfiction is the self-help, things that are going to make you feel better about yourself, things that you're going to learn, especially where that first book was about Tourette syndrome, my fiction novel is about the first woman with Tourette syndrome who was born in 1800 in France. And it's going to talk about that journey that she has, partially just because Tourette syndrome wasn't actually a thing until a year after she passed away. This is also 1800s France, guys. The political upheaval was crazy during that time. She was nobility. So sometimes it's okay to be nobility, sometimes it's not, and they're after your head. So there was that aspect. She also had the swearing form of Tourette's called copralia. All of this just makes such a good story, but it's still going to tie in to this concept of being true to yourself, the self-help, feel good, and my audience is going to cross over fairly well. So I still plan on keeping my pen name rather than choosing a different pen name because it's not super different from what I've already written. And that's kind of the fun thing about writing is you can cross genres, but where I started with a nonfiction base, I feel like I can pull from so many different directions. If I wanted to write a series of spy novels, I could, as long as I tie it back to this central theme that I've already built. If I don't, I choose another pen name because I'm going to be going after a completely different audience. So just always keep in mind who your reader is so that they're not confused as to what the story is going to be about. The reason that J.K. Rowling chose another pen name was because she went from Harry Potter to something completely different. And yes, she might have had better sales if she had kept J.K. Rowling on her other books that she wrote. Excuse me. But they also would have been very disappointed because it's not Harry Potter. It doesn't have the magical, the fantastical element that people fell in love with. I think, and I actually haven't read these books, so I might be wrong on this, but I think her other ones were mystery novels that were very straight-laced, almost John Grisham-esque novels. Very, very different feel, which is also kind of cool. Kudos to her for being able to cross genres, which is a very difficult thing to do, and almost have such a different voice. It's definitely can speak to your skill as a writer. Plus, it's also just kind of fun. It's kind of fun to have this different persona that you step into as an author. For me, and understanding where my Tourette's has helped me not only in writing my first book and getting me into the book writing world, but also the confidence that it's given me as a person. It is kind of this other persona where I can take on Paula's traits and I can leave shy Jessica behind because I'm actually very introverted, very shy. If you asked me a direct question in high school, I would nod or shake my head and I still wouldn't speak to you. But because I have this persona that I'm able to step into, and I can be this personality that I need to be in order to sell my books, in order to host webinars, in order to do speaking engagements. But then I can just go curl up in a blanket with my cats and read and not deal with people for like 3 days. Because sometimes we just need that. Sometimes that's another perk of being a writer. So it kind of helps me in that way to be able to step in to that persona and advertise, promote my book the way that it needs to be when Jessica might not. So something else to also keep in mind with that. The last thing that I want to talk about is the logistics, because this threw me off for months. I had this great pen name. I knew I was going to be visible. If people are writing a check to the author, who do they make the check out to? We wanted to keep my name personal and private, and I didn't want them to make it out to Jessica Smith. But I also, you know, they were going to write this check out to Paula Jean Ferry, who's an imaginary person. And I went and talked to the bank, who they didn't really give me much good information. But what I ended up doing, and this was super helpful, I registered as a business. This isn't something that I just get money for on the side, but being registered as a business, at the time I chose doing business as Paula Jean Ferry. So I could put on a bank account Paula Jean Ferry and have Jessica Smith be on there as well. So it was easy to deal with the financial aspect. The money was still coming to me, even if checks were made out to Paula Jean Ferry, which was, again, super helpful. I've since learned that you do not have to register your business as doing business as. If you register as a sole proprietorship, an LLC, however you decide to do it, which I go into more detail with this in my book. I don't want to go into a ton of detail about that now. That's a totally different beast from what I wanted to talk about tonight with the pen names. But I do go into more detail about that with the self-publishing world, the self-publishing book that I'm going to be releasing soon. But it's been super helpful to know that having a business name while able to run my business with my legal name. I don't run into any legal issues. There are times where when I'm doing speaking engagements, I will have contracts set up, and contracts are very clear, black and white, and it will say the business Paula Jean Ferry, and to distinguish between what my business's liabilities are going to be versus my personal liabilities. So that way I am protected, and I don't have to worry about someone coming after my personal assets, even if they're for some reason unhappy with some kind of legal aspect or something. And we don't have to worry about that a ton as we're small. You know, that's something to think about as we grow for sure. But it still also helps with understanding the logistics of how a pen name is going to run. So with that, those were the main points that I wanted to talk about. So I'm going to end the recording and we'll start with the Q&A.